So that's why we love having those guys like that as part of our community, because it's about the learning, but it's also about being able to pay your bills and do it and getting paid and do something you love. And so I'll stop rambling here. But again, my name is Steve. There's tons of food and stuff in the back. Beer. Feel free to get up anytime and eat it, because if you don't, Nick and I have to do it at the end. It's almost like a ritual. We just crush it, drink all the beer, and leave. But I'll hand it over to Nick. And
supplies for the weekend.
Yeah. I'll hand it over to Nick. And again, if you guys need anything, I'll be right here in the back.
All right, great. Hey, thanks. Yeah, so my name is Nick Wallace. Who here is new to NashDevOps today, first time? Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming. This has been going on for a while. We've had to take a break, like you said, for a little bit there, just to kind of regroup. But so what I do for Red Hat is I'm actually an ISV Partner Alliance Manager. And if you all are aware of Kubernetes, yeah, they actually have operators now that are being built that allows for software vendors to find a custom resource definition in which they can package their software by way of an operator and have it deployed on Kubernetes and allow for multi-cloud consumption of that software. And Kubernetes also provides the runtime for that software as well. So think of it more like a database system, something like MongoDB or something that needs to be able to be consumed by a development team as a service. That's what an operator does. It allows for you to publish that software in the marketplace on Kubernetes platform or OpenShift by way of an operator. Cloud Foundry Foundation also has build packs that do the same thing for Cloud Foundry, and I came from the Cloud Foundry environment as well, basically since its inception. So I've been in the cloud native space for a while. Today I actually partner with other software vendors. I'm aligned to Red Hat's Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning business unit. So I have partners like NVIDIA and NetApp actually for data, and Tableau and others. But I kind of have a little bit of a visibility into where the future is going. So the way that we're planning to do today's session was more along the lines of past state, current state, and future state. And so with that, we're definitely going to make this more interactive. So feel free to chime in when you feel like you have something valuable to add to the group that you feel like that they would like to learn. The biggest, in the spirit of this community from day one, has always been the focus has been on collaboration and lessons learned. And I think that, if you got some things to share with the rest that can help possibly prevent, going down the wrong path maybe or something, because you've done it, it's worth sharing that kind of stuff. So, or if you find some success in a certain area, please share that as well. Now, the content that we put together, actually, I've given a couple of talks on this, so I'm not going to give a talk on it, but I'm very familiar with the content. So along the way, if you want to feel like I said, you got some information to chime in on, please feel free to do so. But what we're going to do is we're going to start out with why. And this actually came out during a TED Talk by Simon Sinek. So you can actually look for this if you wanted to. I'm going to start out with some educational resources before we get started. And the main premise here is that, he basically says, for most organizations, they know what they do. They also know how they do it. But for few people or organizations actually know why they do what they do. And so, you can say, we make this is how we make it, this is what we make it for. But very few people can say, this is why we do it. So I think that if you focus on the why, then that's where you're going to be able to also be motivated in contributing to the things that you're doing, because now you're influencing the outcome of what it is that you're looking to achieve or sell or make a difference on, So to build this out a little further, they actually say do business with people, or you need to build a business with people who believe in what they believe. And so that's why you got to believe in the why. Why is it that we're doing some of the things that we're doing? And at the end of the day, I think that this is the thing that spearheads innovation. So,
can you go back one?
Sure thing.
Can you remove that innovation? People don't buy what you do; they buy why you do it. I don't know. I don't agree with that why. I think people know why they do what they do. It's to fill a market need that the market is asking for and to make money.
All right. So if you wanted to, I feel like the TED Talk for this is very powerful to watch, and I believe in that example they actually used Apple as like being a pioneer in this, and understanding that nobody understood why they were going to be building an iPhone or an MP3 player, and then also to get the people motivated to be able to build something new that the world has never seen before is basically some of the premise behind that. I just kind of took some snippets from it, and people don't believe in what you do, they believe in why you do it. So it's really the people are going to be investing in you even when it comes to a job that you're doing and what it is that you do for that job. But if you're able to explain why you're doing what you're doing, then I think that you'll be able to also get people to follow and believe in what it is that you're trying to achieve.
Okay, yeah. I just that last bullet about few people organization. I don't agree with that. I think most people know why. That's just my point.
Okay, fair enough. Does anybody else have anything else to add there? All right, so what we're also now starting to see is that organizations are starting to make the shift into wanting to deliver apps in a whole new way. The traditional ways just haven't been very successful, but also they're focusing on these things like being able to free up resources, trying to find those things that are manual and repetitive and automate them, getting into more of a continuous app delivery model, standardize on an application platform, not only to be able to deploy to, but now that platform can be the runtime for those applications. And then also, we're starting to see investments now going from IT being a cost center to now being an innovation center, and also being able to produce revenue for an organization versus having to keep the lights on so that they can continue to make revenue off of their existing revenue streams. This is more of along the lines of wanting to innovate on capturing new market share, because there's a lot of disruption out there, and we're seeing it, how complete industries are being disrupted now. And sometimes, because they're able to be nimble enough and move quickly enough, that traditional organizations that are structured with the culture and the bureaucracies that already exist, they won't be able to respond to that disruption because there's policies that are in place that are kind of getting in the way. And so now there's a huge effort in investing towards being able to allow for their applications to be modernized in new ways. Looking at the dependencies of existing applications and being able to figure out whether or not you can lift and shift those applications into a cloud framework or cloud consumption model. And also for net new applications, they're not looking to deploy them and install the server systems that they need and the middleware systems that they need. They are now starting to just deploy straight directly to the cloud and then consume the services that exist in those cloud frameworks to run their application. And so the focus now that we're starting to see is being able to rehost, replatform, or refactor as they're doing the assessment on these applications. Can we rehost this legacy system and lift and shift it to be able to replatform it onto a new framework or a new IaaS environment, infrastructure as a service environment, and then start being able to provide platform as a service offerings? Or should we look to refactor the application altogether? So there's a lot of discovery that's being done on existing applications and how they're going to be able to deploy them. Ultimately, what they want to be able to do is evolve the way in which they're delivering IT services back to the business. And so it's more along the lines of wanting to accelerate application delivery, modernize those existing applications, develop new cloud native applications. This ultimately can help drive business innovation, but also can help revolutionize the way that IT services delivers those capabilities to the business and now becomes a partner to those business units and those lines of businesses. And I think that that is more of the spirit of DevOps itself, in which, you know, it's more about alignment and cohesion. You know, with developers and operators aligned to align a business or business unit. So that's all I had with this slide here. Is there anybody that has any comments with this, starting to see this occurring and want anything to add or share to maybe some things, some challenges that are happening? Yeah.
Hey, what's up, man? So,
Do you want?
no,
Hi.
my wife told me loud. So, like, a lot of the slides are kind of the how and what-ish, right? Like, really the why, like, one of the things that really attracted me to DevOps is the why is you're making your day better, and you're also making your fellow developers and colleagues' days better. Like, the big payoff is who's your customer. Your customer is typically like your fellow software developer, fellow teammate, people on your own team, and work backwards from the customer. So the end customer, eventually following all the way out, is the customer of your business, right? Who you're serving there. But your immediate customer, usually in DevOps, is your customer is generally either your operations team, your development teams, your own team. So one of the things that really attracted me to DevOps, and probably you as well, is you're building products for yourself. The coolest thing about that is you have a really tight feedback loop. You know if it sucks or not, you know if it's great or not. Like, people will tell you if it's working, if it's not working. You don't have to go out and do like these long poll surveys or see how the stock price is going or whether or not people are buying more widgets or less widgets. It's, are people using the service, the product, the thing that you built to make their day better? And then you find more ways to scale it. Are they giving you feedback because they're invested in it? Or is it like radio silent because no one's really using it? So really one of the coolest spaces to me about DevOps is within a company, you can be really close to your customer. Your customer typically is the team within your own company that you're really serving. And then by developing products and services kind of with that mindset, go sit with your development team, go see what they're doing. Go figure out what it is in their workflow that's making their day just miserable, figure out how to solve that problem. Same thing with your own operations teams, just those opportunities. Go get that feedback from the front lines. Ultimately, they're going to pay back that value and pay it forward, not to the external customer, right? So just enjoy it. Enjoy it for what it is. The why behind all this is going to be finding out who your customer is internally, who do you feel like your team serves, and then going and talking to that customer very directly, really understanding what it is that they need, and maybe potential opportunities of things that they're not really even thinking about right now that you know you potentially provide value to. If you want to accelerate your DevOps roadmap, that's going to be the best place to start. Because as soon as you start plugging away and finding ways to show that value, that feedback's going to circulate. There's going to be ways to measure that value, and you're going to watch your roadmap. It's going to continue to accelerate. You're also going to create headroom, and creating more headroom in somebody else's day is going to allow them to do more. They'll be able to invest time in learning new ways of approaching problems, looking for other problems that need to be solved that haven't been tackled yet. But it just kind of continues to pay dividends on itself, right? Like compounding interest. And the more headroom you create, it just creates a lot more velocity. So find ways to create momentum in your business. But definitely make it a customer focus and just figure out your customer. If you're focused on DevOps, that's kind of like your role. It's generally not a job title. But if you're kind of in that space, your customer is probably going to be somebody that's really close to you if you want them to be. You just need to go find out who they are and pull them in.
I'd just like to say, that's all good stuff. If you're on a DevOps team, you know, if you're on the development team, the operations team's your partner. They're not your customer. You have a common customer. That could be an internal stakeholder, an internal business team, or people that consumes your product or your services. But you're a partner, an equal partner. If you're on the development team, the operations team's your partner. If you're the ops team, the development team's your partner. They're not your customers. I mean, customer gets thrown around very loosely. Okay, you have a common customer that can be internal or external, but you're partnering internally between development and operations. So.
Right, agreed. And so when you're building one of those modern platforms or container platform, you know, SRE skill sets are brought into play here. So outside reliability engineering, and the way that I've seen it, and I think that what we've all talked about is around the concept of having a platform operations team, and that is developers and operators working together as a partner. And but the feedback loop on that team needs to be there, because developers are focused on delivering the application in which the business that they're aligned to is feeding their backlog, so to speak. of things that they need to do. So now you got that product owner that is prioritizing that backlog. The developers need to be able to deliver on that backlog and very quickly. And the operations team is supporting the platform in which they are deploying to, but also the operations team wants to move as much friction from the developers as possible so that they can deliver fastly. So in this case, the platform operations team can be those SRE skill sets of developers and operators, supporting product ownership teams that are the developers that are writing new applications that's adding value to the business. And so there needs to be a feedback loop there from the product ownership team to the platform operations team. Then another feedback loop that I see comes from the business to those product ownership teams. And then take it one step further, the feedback loop is coming from the customers to the business, to the product ownerships, to the platform team. And then also to the data center teams, those people that are needing to scale, if you're deploying privately or publicly. You need those cloud operators there too. So it's definitely a feedback loop that I see a chain coming from all the way from the customers all the way to us in IT. But we need to see the value in that to be able to deliver on that. Is how I view this. But then furthermore, we're starting to see functions as a service, and AI and machine learning is being very important in some of that, and what things that are doing in Knative. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, it's not about the matrix. It's more about finding efficiencies within a business and programming an artificial intelligent model to be able to learn that one segment of the business so well, almost better than the humans, but you got to feed it data so that it can do its modeling to learn from. And then in certain business segments, let's just say, for example, let's take a chatbot, right? So a chatbot could be aligned to marketing. That marketing team says, I want to deploy a chatbot. You say, great, but now we need NLP skill sets for natural language programming. We need artificial intelligence skill sets so that they can build that AI engine that can interpret what that human is asking the chatbot in real time, to be able to process what it just asked and understand what that human asked and through NLP. And then the artificial intelligent agent needs to understand how to go find the answer. But the answer is through a data lake on the back end of it, potentially, in which those answers are there. And if you're in healthcare, that business segment could be, I just logged onto my insurance company's website because I have a rash, I want to know what symptoms they are, and then the chatbot can easily respond, but the human is too embarrassed to call somebody and ask them about it. So, and now when you think about insurance companies in general, they are also ones in which they, through preventative health care, they're not paying a lot of, they're more investing now in longer term life care, in preventative health care, because the longer that we're alive, the longer they have us as a customer. And so now they're starting to look at their business in that way. But then you look at it, car companies and self-driving cars and all the accident protection built into it. Car companies aren't making their money anymore from paying for damages and repairs. So now they have to get more reactive in understanding where the industry is going in the segments that they're in. And because of that, it's putting a lot of pressure on development teams to be able to build out these environments very quickly. And so it definitely is an area in which you need to be able to work with those business units as a partner to be able to help them deliver on these new capabilities faster so that they're not disrupted. So as you can see, there's different areas in which that can be deployed. But to take a step back, I'll talk about how this all started to come about and how IT organizations are now starting to be seen as the new kingmakers, for example. And anybody ever heard of this book? A few nods, but I suggest you go read it. It's a free ebook. It's, I don't know, maybe 34, 50 pages long. It's easy. The publication, I think, was written around the 2010 or 11, I think. But it's all about the software developers now being the new kingmakers. And it basically has to do everything what I was just talking about. But then you take this even further, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard this before. Software is eating the world. Another publication that was done by Andreessen Horowitz Mark Andreessen was one of the founders of Netscape, the very first web browser. And so that gave us as human beings access to all the information in the world that's provided on the internet. And so now he runs a major VC firm out in Silicon Valley, and he had this article published in the Wall Street Journal around that same time talking about how software will eventually be eating the world. And we're starting to see that now. And now, the new buzzword is digital business. So, when you think about digital business, it's all of these 5 things in which you take in digital security and risk into account. You need to be able to achieve rapid integration and start to build out a model of systems of engagement. And so now, if you are a company that ships products, you've got to interface with distribution channels, supply chain, logistics, inventory control, all of those things, and then how your customer is buying it off the internet, right? So now that's more of a systems of engagement model, but it can potentially create a lot of risk. We also need to be adaptable and flexible. Also understand how to collect sensor data off the Internet of Things, and then also be able to scale your performance. But at the end of the day, I think this is DevOps organizations that are working with a business that's using the things to build the things that creates the business. And so that's where I've implanted this graphic on top of, and basically think now that DevOps could potentially be the heart of that. So I think that's the last thing. Oh, there we go. So now you take that a little further. Now we got development, software engineering, aligned with quality assurance, and now there's practices being put into place around quality engineering and those feedback loops that need to be put in place. So now you're taking security and baking it into the development process. You're taking your quality controls and also trying to automate them and ensure that all those safety measurements are put in place when you are pushing a new software product out. And the technology operations to be able to forecast against consumption and understand how much cloud computing resources you're using, and so that you will be able to effectively be able to forecast and budget against that. And so, this Venn diagram, I think, also marries well with the hedgehog concept that was written in a book called From Good to Great. On my first day at HCA, I was given this book by the HR organization and did not think that it one day would evolve to this. This was a book that was written a long time ago, but it's very similar to DevOps, but building the practice of strategic excellence and what can you be best at, what drives your economic engine, and what are you passionate about? And so I think that this is where a lot of innovation occurs, by approaching the work that you do in that manner. And now, when you're thinking about disruption, there's actually another book, and I've heard a lot of technology CEOs say this, and especially when they talk about disruption, about it's not the big that eat the small, it's the fast that eat the slow. First time I heard that was at VMworld when Pat Gilsinger got up on stage and said, the S&P 500 today looks like this, 60% of them are going to be extinct in 5 years. And that was a while ago. And he said exactly that, the name of the book, and I found out that it's a book and that it wasn't just him that made it up. But I think that this is a great example of the evolution of where we've been, where we are today, where we're going, and disruption is front and center. So, anything to add? Comments?
I don't see how Internet of Things fits into the other classes.
Oh, really? Okay. So I will say that when let's take Lyft for example. Those cars as they're driving, those cars are now an Internet of Things. So if you are a car company that one day wants to mass produce self-driving cars, what Lyft is doing with all those rides is they're building a map and starting to see over time that the Internet of Things is collecting all this data in which you can learn from when humans need a ride from point A to point B. And so I believe that that is one area of an Internet of Things. Your homes are as well. And so how do you think Honeywell is still successful because now they're creating these Internet of Things devices in your home that is sensor data. It takes software developers to be able to write that. Does that make sense, or
Yeah.
is there something that you feel like you're...
It's just that Internet of Things is more like a technical feature or advancement, kind of, where we have devices that are connected and communicating with one another, for example, in the house. Scale performance, adaptable, flexible, rapid integration. All of that, those are kinds of positive or good quality features for any product or service. So it just seems like
Well,
they're
there's
characteristics.
business units that are now like investing their business on capturing a market by leveraging everything you just described and categorizing it as an Internet of Thing to be able to monetize on and capture that business forward. Like your refrigerator having a camera inside of it and being able to order milk for you automatically. There is a revenue stream there that's tied to it, but it takes software developers to be able to write software to be able to take advantage of that Internet of Thing device, which is the camera inside your refrigerator, which your refrigerator is connected to the internet. So anyways, I also see that there's 5 classes that will, to go along with this. This is the feedback loop that we're talking about. And so you have collaboration on one side and communication on the other. But that continuous feedback that we've been talking about, I think this graphic kind of captures everything around that we were talking about. Let's talk about some of the things, I guess, now that makes DevOps successful in your organization. Now, I will say that it is a culture shift. It is disruptive within your own organization. It's disruptive to your job. It's disruptive to the business in which wants to be able to use DevOps. But if you're able to find the value in it, then disruption is good. So let's talk about some of the things, some of the common patterns in which we've seen over the years in which you must have. And for one, you need to have a target to shoot for. Like be able to identify your key performance indicator that you want to capture, your KPI. And what is it that we want to improve on or make better in the way that we deliver IT services to the company that gives us our paycheck. I believe in this, the way when we talk about being a partner with your teammates, and your teammates are now a partner to the business. I believe that with that, you need to align on a common vision and have a unified approach. And then being able to delegate those tasks and responsibilities to those on your team that are capable to fulfill those for the broader team. And yeah, we talked about what does success look like for us when we want to go do this. What are some cross-functional, as you're going to build these composed teams, you're going to look at various cross-functional skill sets. And so that could be, I need a database administrator that knows how to model our data. I need a full stack engineer. I need a application developer that knows Python. I also need an application developer that knows, I don't know, another language. But yeah, I mean, and then also being able to automate those software delivery pipelines so that you remove the manual intervention and ultimately the human error. And so, any comments on this? How do you guys feel you're at with this? Are you having success in building some of these, or contributing to these composed teams? And is it making a difference in the organizations that you work in?
What's meant by a composed team?
A composed team is one that's purpose-built for the outcome that you're trying to achieve based on the skill sets.
I found that if the team's already there, you almost gotta find someone that's gonna be like your advocate of like, you wanna fix the way you run doctor, or your doctor causes jack like all these things they don't complain about, but there's sometimes not someone that will want to fix it, and so you wind up either being on their team or like finding someone that does care enough or is just willing to, or whatever it is.
Yeah, so what about, the way I see this too is more along the lines of that you got grassroots efforts that are occurring, and then you have top-down efforts that are occurring too, and you need to meet in the middle, but then middle management is impacted by that because they're impacted by, that's not in their job description, and also we got too much bureaucracy and policies and procedures in place from the upper management. So you definitely need full support from the top down in order to achieve that, getting stuck and spinning your wheels and not gaining any traction on some of those efforts. So is there visibility to that? And one other area that I would say visibility is what I just described, I believe, is the IT organization, but we also need visibility into those business segments and the lines of businesses that the IT organization supports and those customers out of the IT organization. So I think grassroots efforts are good because it raises awareness and visibility that like you're trying to make more valuable use of your time, and your management would be happy with that as well because now they are getting more production from their employees, but should it stop there, you know? And then I also think that you need executive sponsorship. And when the executive sponsorship occurs, that is then going to those business units and lines of businesses to help support and endorse that. And then next thing you know, a lot of the policies and bureaucracies and procedures and controls might start to be removed or refactored themselves. Yeah.
We might be getting to this on a subsequent slide, but KPIs for success.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to see some examples?
Yeah.
So there you go. Nice softball. So yeah, some of the things that you can look for here is, you know, what is it that you're trying to achieve with Docker? What is our mean time to recovery? What is our sprint cycles look like? Do we want to go from 1 month down to 2 weeks? Are we only doing 3 month sprints? I don't know what, you know, your release cadence looks like in your software delivery model, but those are some examples of some KPIs that you can capture. What else do we have on here? Yeah, so I'm going to talk about small batch deploys in a moment as well. And before I get there, the biggest thing though I think is trust. So you need to be able to trust your teammates to be able to deliver on the things that they say that they are capable of doing in those composed teams. You need to be able to trust your management. You need your management to be able to trust their C-level suite. You need the C-level suite to trust the lines of businesses and set expectations on what they're asking for. So I think that in order to be successful in any organization, you need to trust the people that you work with and work for. And you need to trust those that work for you. And so, anybody heard of this? The Agile Manifesto? So what this is saying here is that individuals and interactions are valued more than the processes and tools that are in place. So for going back to the Docker, I think that is one example of we are choosing to use Docker to package our software into a container. Is that working for you? Great. Then we don't have to worry about deploying it in a virtual machine anymore. That's a process and tool that you now change because your individuals and interactions are valued more than that, or should be. When you want to bring in the agile methodology into your organization, this is the manifesto and potentially guide to follow. So you should trust a working product over comprehensive documentation. And what that means there is that you're never going to make money off of a reference architecture or a white paper, but you will make money off of it if it is working, and then you go to write the white paper later and show the output of it and what it was able to achieve. Customer collaboration is valued over contract negotiation. So you're never going to be successful by holding somebody to their SLA without listening to their feedback. And responding to change over following a plan. How many people have planned a vacation? How many people have planned anything and it never goes to plan? So just know that change is inevitable, and that you know you need to have a composed team that knows how to respond well to that change in order to be successful. Anybody got any I'm sure there's some horror stories out there, but any stories of success?
There are some, those KPIs that you talk about, are there more coming?
Oh, there's a whole bunch of them. I just snagged a few as an example.
Yeah, there are 5 in the DORA report, the state of DevOps.
Oh, I know Dora. I know Jess Humble and Dr. Kohlberg. You want to take this for a second? Because I need to hold up.
Well, you know. DORA report, it's the state of DevOps report, super awesome, lots of good learning there. And there are 5 major metrics that they use to measure how good you are at DevOps. The 5 metrics from memory, so don't hold me to this. MTTR, cycle time, lead time, change rate, and change failure rate from memory. But that's probably not correct, not quite right. But those 5 things, KPIs, are the how do I make someone care that DevOps matters by couching it in the human terms of what I want to avoid in terms of loss or slowness or pain, and also in terms of what I want to pursue in terms of agility and productivity and effectiveness. And you can couch, for many years I've created dev teams, I do my report card, and you use those report cards on dev teams to show how teams that operate at a C level are not just 10% less effective than those that operate at A level, but multiplicatively less effective by hard to measure type of numbers. So that's all.
Yeah.
So there are really good KPIs that are industry standards for the DORA people. Put it up, DORA.
The book is called Accelerate.
There you go.
The Dora, actually, in my last job, sold Dora services, where we did DevOps assessments, and partnered with Dora. And they wrote a book. I think I put it in a slide here somewhere. It's called Accelerate, and it's by Jez Humble, who basically wrote the Lean Enterprise. He wrote the Continuous Delivery book, worked for ThoughtWorks. And Dora was just acquired by Google just recently, actually, the Institute was. So, look up Dora, look up the book Accelerate, and there's plenty of examples in there. The Lean Startup is also another good one, and the DevOps Handbook, and there's other ones, but we'll get into that here in a moment. But Agile is more of a direction, not a place. I just snagged some graphics off the internet from this guy, Henrik Nyberg. If you haven't heard of him, look him up. He's got some great graphics around all of this. He's like an Agile guru. But he's also saying be careful with metrics, because they can be gamified, especially for those that are incentivized to hit on some of those based on goals, bonuses, or whatever. So be careful with that. Also know that you need to learn to fail, and you're going to experience some pitfalls, but it's important to learn from them. Like I was talking about earlier, just if you got anything to share with each other as well, we can all learn from it. And you need to understand what your anticipated path is, avoid the chaos chasm. But ultimately, you want to be able to get into this path of incremental improvement, to be able to dilute the pain as best as possible, and change should become a habit also. So, anything to add there, because I got another thing I wanted to walk through next. Sound good so far? Alright, so I spent 2 years in Okinawa, Japan when I was in the Marine Corps, and discovered this shrine in Japan that I knew was something interesting about it, and it just happens to be a shrine that has existed for 2,000 years, in which every 20 years the community comes together and rebuilds this shrine. They tear it down and rebuild it from the ground up. The story here to me means that this is sustainability, but this is also sustainability when it comes to culture preservation, as well as tool sets changing. Do you think that they're using the same tools 2,000 years later to reproduce the same shrine? You can't, there was no Home Depot or Lowe's that existed back then. So, to me, preserving culture is the greatest asset that any business can have in order to survive generation gaps over time. And so if you have a strong culture put in place in which changes the habits and all of these things are in place, you're going to embrace disruption, you're going to be a disruptor yourself, that is a part of your culture. Also, evolution is inevitable. What matters most is how we respond to change and transform in order to adapt. Look at your careers. For example, I'm sure there's been a lot of that has occurred. It definitely has occurred in mine. So people and process and technology are the things in which feed this culture, feed the disruption, and working together, all of this can be becoming a competitive advantage. All right, so now let's get into the tech stack. So let's just imagine that now as an IT employee, this is your shrine, and you have culture in which you're interacting with, because that's your place of work. And so now this is a common stack in the IT landscape, I believe, where you have infrastructure, you now have cloud services available, and then those applications are now running on those cloud services and also being consumed by those using those services. And you also have private and public cloud. When it comes to private cloud, that is building out an infrastructure as a service framework so that your IT organization can deploy on, but you are choosing to stay private because you might have data gravity concerns or data sovereignty concerns, and meaning that you cannot move your data very easily because it's stuck in the data centers in which those systems are running in, and it's hard to migrate them out to the public cloud. But now, if you want to differentiate your business, you're differentiating by your applications, so that are being ran on those clouds. But you can now buy this, and you should be building what's unique to your business. And now, with cloud comes a platform as a service, and containers. And containers were disruptive. Has anybody here not dabbling or playing with containers yet? No? You're not?
Yeah.
So, all right. Are you familiar with what they can do?
Yeah, I've read up on it. I just not actively hands-on.
Okay, great. That's common, believe me. It's more than common, because now a lot of IT organizations are starting to understand how to run containers at scale. And I will talk about that here in a moment, but it is something in which I highly suggest that you start to dabble with or understand, or reach out to coworkers that might know something about it. Maybe you can start playing with them on the concept of container and what it can do. But basically what you're doing with the container is you're abstracting the operating system dependencies. So now if you think about an operating system, what an operating system does is it's the middleman between software applications that is providing hardware, network, memory, and disk resources. And so there's 4 resources: that is public cloud, that's infrastructure as a service that's being consumed. An operating system provides those resources to that application. A container allows you to package your application within it, and it can abstract the dependencies from the operating system in a sense. It still needs to have the definition in the container of what resources it needs, and there's going to be a lightweight Linux operating system in it, but that is what interfaces with the broader system in general. So it's like taking a virtual machine, but virtual machines were built with the OS baked in and all the dependencies baked in it. Now, the container allows for you to package your application so it can run and gain access to those resources without having dependency of an full-blown operating system within it. Like Windows is a full-blown operating system with everything within it. So now that became disruptive, and now because of that, you are able to rapidly deliver on your software, and now take the concepts of a minimum viable product and be able to deploy on that. Bring in agile methodologies and practices, continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines, test-driven development, sprints that are based on these development teams that say we are going to produce a very bare minimum MVP and create an iteration backlog to make that thing better. All of that is disruptive to IT organizations. And so the only way that you can figure this stuff out is learn by doing. And disrupt yourselves. And then you can transform your organization from being a project delivery organization into a product delivery organization. And that's where you can start to take the concepts of IT organization being a cost center, keeping the lights on, to now adding value to a product team to produce a new product that you can monetize and collect revenue off of.
What do you mean by MVP?
Yeah, minimum viable product. I'll talk about it in a moment.
I know what that is.
Okay.
Kind of brainstorm.
So now, if you're transforming your monolithic systems that had all those dependencies, these monolithic systems, typically you scale them up. So you need more database, you scale up the entire stack for hardware resources, and then you take that entire stack and then you replicate it to scale out. So now you got to replicate that entire stack out instead of abstracting those dependencies. And so now this is called distributed scale out. So now you're taking a tightly coupled monolithic system and then figuring out how to scale it, but you're not scaling only the things that need to be scaled, you're scaling the entire stack to replicate it because you don't know where those dependencies are. And so that evolved into a services-oriented architecture, or an ESB, an enterprise service bus potentially, to be able to connect those stacks. And now, what we're starting to see with cloud computing is the ability to build these cloud-native applications that can handle that scale, eliminate those dependencies, and now you're only going to scale on those dependencies that are needed. So in this example, this is your presentation layer. This is your, how do I gain access to that marketplace or portal? This is your inventory. This is your shopping cart. And this is your point of sale. So now when you want to scale that, you got to take that entire stack and all these tightly coupled dependencies and scale them also. Ultimately, what we want to be able to evolve into is now, you've all shopped on Amazon Prime, you saw that shopping cart experience change over time. You know, what if you don't recommend the top 10, or what if you don't recommend the thing that's in your shopping cart? Here's what other people bought in the shopping cart experience. You want to take that down, and now instead of breaking the entire system, you can just then display the top 10 DVD sales this month, you know, as an example, because it is no longer dependent on all of these other things. So, therefore, you can have a product development team just focus on the shopping cart experience, a product development team just focus on the point of sale, and so on. And so that's how you're starting to be able to break up the IT organization as well, to now be focused on the product by those composed teams that they're building in order to do so. And so now we want multi-cloud and hybrid cloud with this. Because when I was talking about data gravity concerns, what if you cannot take your inventory and ship that out to the public cloud because your inventory has been sitting on a database in your data centers forever? You know, that's terabytes and petabytes of data. But you can potentially take that point of sale system out to the cloud. You can potentially take that shopping cart experience out to the cloud. So now that creates your multi-cloud and hybrid cloud demand to be on-prem and off-prem. So basically, we want to be able to take this from a tightly coupled system to start finding those dependencies and loosely coupling those things and start pulling them out, and then ultimately have a microservices architecture in which now each one of those products is a microservice that feeds a bigger system. So, anything to add there? Any challenges here? Like, are you guys experiencing this stuff in any way? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. My experience has been in working with companies, being a consultant, and also working with AWS now. So you have to kind of figure out where you're at. And products are going to vary. There's going to be some that are strategic that are like not in maintenance mode and actually push forward. There's going to be other workloads and applications and services that are going to be in maintenance mode that you're going to have to just to say, how do I reduce the cost profile of this workload? And that's a win, but we're really not going to invest a lot more effort in this. We're just going to keep it like meetings only. And there's going to be those workloads and applications that are things that are targets for either, strategic targets, right? Like for innovation, for modernization that you want to invest more in, they're actually going to kind of go on this journey from wherever they're at to wherever they're going to be, whether that's containers, whether that's serverless. And a lot of it's just, it is that, it's a journey. It's just like, how do you break those things apart? Going from like a monolithic application straight to serverless is probably not going to make much sense. You're probably going to go through various iterations of that.
Right.
We start breaking that application up into smaller and smaller pieces, and eventually get down to like a very kind of like function level, like resource level. So it just, all these things we're talking about, which are good, it's a journey that happens over time. We're going to take something that potentially is large and complex, and just continue to break it down into smaller and smaller components to be acted on independently. And as you're doing that, it's not just the technology bit that's changing, it's the people and process bit that's changing, right?
Absolutely.
So you're going to have the friction between, whether it's good or bad, between people and processes and technology, kind of going through various cycles. Like, there's good friction and there's bad friction, right? Like, good friction is like, we have traction, momentum, that type of thing. Bad friction is we're causing a lot of excess heat, we're burning a lot of energy for no reason, right? So it's like, thinking about how do you have good friction in processes and try to avoid bad friction is kind of like a good concept, but all of these things, it's like, you're not gonna go from 0 to 100 overnight. You're gonna start somewhere around a 1 or 2 with an old legacy application stack, and eventually over time, improve it, right? And just kind of categorize the wins. I think one of the key things, Nick, like a few slides ago that was good is just find things that are worth measuring, right? Like, so that you can demonstrate what the value is. Whether it's that your build time went from 20 minutes down to 5 minutes, whether you can do deployments in the middle of the day versus having to do them like off cycle, peak after peak, weekends. Like, that's your team not working nights and weekends, right? Like, that's a huge value add. So there's a lot of different ways you can measure success. Some of it's just going to be the happiness of the teams that you work with, because you've been able to, deploy like a better product, something that's more stable, more simple to manage. But there's the people and process aspect of all of this. So it's like technology definitely enables a lot of things. People and process and culture, like the culture side was kind of interesting to me because, like, in some ways, culture has gotten you to where you're at, and now you're going in and you're trying to transform that. Well, what does that mean, right? You're talking about people and the things that they've relied on process-wise to get things done. And trying to rip all that out from underneath and like totally replace it in a day is not really going to work. So I'm a big fan of seeing is believing. If you can bring people into more of a immersion experience where they can see and believe and participate, that's probably the most valuable experience versus like a presentation, like a slight demo. It's like you kind of have to be able to immerse people into this to really see it. Seeing is believing. And if you have a way of demonstrating that within your teams, within your companies, it'll be successful because people will get a taste for it, and they'll really like it, and they'll like the fact that they can move things in the speed in which they can work, and they'll see that, hey, if I work smarter and harder, I can move faster, right? And being able to demonstrate that within your teams and organization makes a huge difference. So seeing is believing. Find ways to demonstrate that. Find ways to create more headroom in your team so you can actually do that, and it just kind of feeds on itself. It's kind of difficult to start. It might be like nights and weekends to get started, but eventually, hopefully, you've created enough momentum to where any leader worth their salt is going to want to hitch their wagon to what you're doing.
Right.
And that's that right there. It's like you'll find your champion that way, right? If they're just not emerging automatically through, just whatever processes you have for finding leaders. But
yeah, so,
let leadership be organic.
So I didn't want to necessarily say go back to your company and now we got to do this and change overnight. I hope the things that I've been talking about haven't been interpreted that way because the theme of what I've been talking about, I'm hoping is coming across as, like Brian said, is a journey. And so how do you, this could be a 3-year journey or a 5-year journey, been in the industry a long time and been on the flip side of transformation since 2011 and been watching companies finally get to that stage, but it doesn't happen overnight. But to his point, that's why I decided to skip ahead. There's this concept of short batch releases that are now being taken into consideration. So even when I said you need to have a common vision and a unified approach, it's not necessarily to take this big monolithic system and dissolve it into microservices or decompose it. It's more along the lines of each week that you go into work, and if you're participating in weekly sprints, what is our unified vision and approach towards accomplishing this small step that we need to do this week in order to get to the bigger picture, in which management is hoping that we'll be able to get to one day. And so, with short batch releases, there's many things that can be obtained here and achieved, and one of them is you're able to back out quickly. So if you just do a small incremental change and it backfires, just pull that small incremental change back out, or you can start to do other things too, like blue-green deploys, A/B testing, canary deploys. So there's all these other ways in which you can do that, and also have a config management system put in place too that's capturing those things. But through this new way is being able to build on the idea, test it, release it, operate it, and then understand how to codify it. So this must be really easy. It should not be something that's hard. So you need to release often and frequently and small and simple, like we were talking about, in order to be able to achieve that. Because if you do it the other way, then that's where you're going to experience a lot of pain, the pain that hurts. So now let's see, go back to the MVP. I think I pulled it out. All right, but I just wanted to bring that up to the point. Yeah.
I mean, the new leading, the modern stuff, the cool thing, like you just said, is microservices, containers, right? But when does it really make sense, or when is it worth the effort to take an existing large monolithic application, decompose it into microservices and to containerize it and all of that, as opposed to just keeping the large application and using agile software development to develop it further?
Great question. I'm not suggesting, me personally, I'm not suggesting that you should do that with everything.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking, when does it make sense?
Oh, when does it make sense?
Understand.
Right on. So, if you want to know if you're managing systems today, does it make sense? I think that you should ask the stakeholders that are involved, because what you can do is share with them. One example is like, it is too difficult to make changes to this system because it's too tightly coupled and there's all these dependencies that we have to be aware of. So instead, we're not touching it at all. And if you don't touch it at all, then you're not going to be able to iterate on that thing to make it better over time. So one of the things that you need to be able to identify is what makes sense to be able to do that, right? So when we're talking about like decomposing this previous diagram, right? Maybe it makes sense to pull the shopping cart out and do that. So there are some components within a system that you can narrow in on and focus on to say, every time we want to update this system, all we really want to do is update this small little component in the system. If you're able to identify that, then you can start to identify mapping out its dependencies, its connective tissue to these other things, and then figure out a way that you can pull that out so that it doesn't take down the entire system and become disruptive to an outage. And then so, once you're able to identify those components within the system that you just want to make better, because maybe it doesn't make sense to do anything with the inventory control system, right? Because that is running just fine, and we don't need to really improve on it. But we do need to improve on our shopping cart experience for those people that are looking for those things that's in the inventory. And then so you can start to be able to pull those things out. So there's no golden rule or answer, or the right answer to it. It just has to depend on your environment and the requests that you're starting to see on things that people are asking to improve on.
Yeah. I can see new products being developed, using that paradigm, using microservices and Dockers, but in existing products, I just don't see the value in all the effort that is going to be needed, time, cost, resources to break it down for an existing product that's already working. The other thing is with Agile Scrum, you talked about Agile Scrum in the next slide and stuff, and about if a product, Agile Scrum is really good for when you have technology risks, a lot of technology risks when you have uncertain functional requirements. But other than that, waterfall will work okay. So Agile is not, is not just something you do all the time. It's, you know, it's.
Right. Understood. Yeah, and everybody's different, you know, and even with these conversations, it's hard to accommodate for everyone. But the theme of what I was trying to hopefully achieve here today was around the fact of what does past, current, and future look like, you know, for a lot of organizations and stuff like that. So, you know, if you're finding that to be one area in which, you know, you've not seen a need for it, then that's okay. Unless you are the stakeholder and are trying to make money off of it. But, you know, good questions, for sure, and good comments. And this may not be for everyone, but it makes sense for the net new stuff and things like that. But it's just good to be aware of these things. And that's all I'm trying to share with you all. Steve and I, when we came up with the idea about today's session, it's just kind of being able to take the perception in which we've been able to see and relay that to you all as well. Because one of the things that we found in this group also there are people over the last 3.5, 4 years that have gone on to say, coming to this group has been great because we thought that we were behind the times, and then found out that not only were they were not behind the times, but they were ahead of where they thought they were. So, you know, or vice versa. So, you know, what we're trying to share here is more of a community in which you can like gauge the temperature of where you're at on your journey, and not to, I mean, even when I interface with customers in their office and with businesses in their office, they say, we feel like we need to get ahead of containers because software vendor is coming to us with their next distribution of their software in a containerized distribution. In order to run that containerized distribution of their software, they have to have a container platform that can run that. And so that could be OpenShift, that could be Cloud Foundry, that could be Kubernetes, that could be Docker, that could be Mesosphere. There's a bunch of platform orchestration tools out there that run containers. It's now starting to force the hand of IT organizations when a business is coming into their organization and says, here, Kronos, our timekeeping system, is now coming out in a containerized distribution in the next major software release coming out in 9 months. We gotta run this, because HR needs it, our people that punch in the clock need it. So it's forcing the hand of an IT organization to now bring in a platform in order to run that software. So if it doesn't exist in your IT organization today, it will at some point, because some line of business stakeholder is going to be coming to the IT organization with funding and says, you now have to support this. Does that make sense? So how do you run containers at scale? Well, it's hard. So that's why you need Kubernetes. So if you haven't heard of Kubernetes, it is an open source platform that was open sourced by Google. They're using it within the organization. It's to be able to deploy container at scale off of a container image. Like I said, commodity off-the-shelf software is now going to be distributed in containerized distributions. Monolithic applications can now be containerized. So that's what I was talking about when it comes to lift and shift. You can actually take that entire application and modernize it by replatforming it and then going to decompose it later. And so with Kubernetes, you can achieve those microservices. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because I think that we hit on a lot of it. I want to get to the next thing about how do you go about planning for this. And so, for one, you need to know what your process is. Choose those tools that's unique to your culture in order where everybody can rally around on those composed teams and say, let's build this thing. And then you also need the architecture that's resilient enough to accommodate for failure. So that is public cloud. Those are those SLAs that exist out there. You need to have technology that is imperative and, anyways, I'm just going to keep going through it. Because here's what we're talking about when developers and operations teams are starting to come together. Now they got all these concerns that they didn't have before. So you've got to be able to test these things before you deploy them. So that's test-driven development. You also have to have quality control features being put into place, image management, because now if you understand virtual machines, they deploy from a template, while containers are deployed from an image, and that image defines the state of that container. And now you got to have a container image registry. So you got to index those container images and offer them up on a registry. And then when those containers are deployed in runtime, they don't carry any state for the most part. They need to connect to state, but they don't carry any state. And now there's this concept of pets versus cattle. And your virtual machines, you cared for them. You gave them a name. Could have been something out of, what? Lords of the Rings or something, you name that server, right? So now, that is your pet. You really care for it. You provide all its care and feeding. With containers, they're more like cattle or chickens, you know? They are deployed, they can be killed when there's something corrupted that's just redeployed off the image because you know the image is good. So you don't have to do the care and feeding for it. That's what Kubernetes provides, is containers. So, I think I was going to the, product development, actually. Minimum viable product, right? So, it's been going on since cars have been created.
That's funny.
You know, and that's disruption. I'll go back. I'll actually leave the slides behind. I'll share you a link with this. This is on Google Slides. It's a cloud-native presentation application. So, anyways, you didn't imagine building that. So, when you take the lean startup, this is a feedback loop. Yeah, Miles.
Before we move past Kubernetes real quick, I just wanted to
Sure.
ask, he asked earlier, how many people are using containers and Docker, and almost everybody said yes. Who all is using Kubernetes? So a few of us. Kubernetes is definitely the big dog in orchestration. What are some of the other ones that you are using? Only 3 out of everyone here is using Kubernetes.
There's probably people in here that aren't necessarily hands-on technology.
Sure.
And who's using containers and broad? That's the other question. Some people are like, well, sure, that maybe technically, but production, not yet. That's how you get there.
Feel free to get another drink of pizza if you want to.
So is there another orchestration tool that people are using in production?
There's several. ECS is another big one. Just Rancher's native, Rancher Swarm, Mesosphere does a lot of that. But Kubernetes and getting into Kubernetes is complex.
Those are also, a few of those that you said are Kubernetes distributions.
Yes. Another one, so one of the things that, so I kind of take a year technology where I take one specific technology and I try to match to it as close as possible. Kubernetes is this year for me. And if you haven't heard of or used Rancher, it's completely 100% open source. It's probably, if you're trying to get to Kubernetes, it's the lowest barrier to entry. Just a plug, 100% open source.
Okay, so thank you, and it is good to know that Kubernetes is getting a lot of attention as it deserves. So I think we're coming down to time, but I definitely wanted to end with this because when we're planning our journeys and we are planning to deliver IT in a new way, we typically approach it through this framework of needing to understand the design, the platform, the life cycle for the project, the hardening, how we're going to harden this thing, the resiliency, accommodating for failure, the operations behind it, how we're going to support it, the maintenance, and then the governance, right? So when we go to approach deploying out a new system, some organizations make the decision to tackle it from top down or by tasks. I don't think that that is the right approach. I think that you need to have all of those things accounted for in your sprints. And so therefore, it should cross-cut all of that. From each sprint, this is where you get to incorporate security and DevSecOps. This is where you get to incorporate things like GitOps and all these other things so that you're codifying your sprint all together to accommodate for all of that. Some of these may end up, the backlog for it may be bigger or longer or whatever, or maybe you are progressing somewhat faster in that area, but I think that when you go to deploy anything, you need to cross-cut against all of that in order to do so. And so, ultimately, what is the fastest way to go from concept to cash? Traditionally, you got all these organizations, and so therefore it takes months. And how do you prioritize against that? One example is when I was back in a traditional IT environment in the mid-2000s, as an enterprise architect or an enterprise engineer, my backlog was supporting all the business units. And it didn't matter which VP of IT came to me waving his title and says, I got funding for this project. What I didn't realize at the time was he's also gold on that project, he's also getting bonuses off that project, and all those other things. So therefore, it is top priority, and his title of VP made me do his top priority thing first because of that. Or this other organization says, hey, can you really get to this for me? Here's a plate of brownies. Sure, no problem. But the problem is, how does that help the business, right? So how do you go from concept to cash in that kind of environment? Prioritization is hard to achieve when you got supply chain, distribution, and all these others coming at you. So the IT organization doesn't even know how to prioritize. So they start out by hiring a PMO, project management officer. And so they're the ones that are supposed to be looking at that filter and funnel of work coming to the IT organization. And still, how do we get that SQL database administrator to now do this thing? How do we get that network engineer to do this thing? So that's where like the composed teams really come into play. And so now, if you take like that diagram that we had before of the shopping cart team, now what if they have their own composed team? They're now able to get from concept to cash faster for that one thing because it's not dependent on all those other things. Same with marketing, same with distribution and supply chain, same with all these other different business units, human resources, finance, all of them. They all have systems that IT organizations must support. Do you think it makes sense now to create a product team aligned to that system that that business unit is using, and then be able to iterate on those instead? That's, I think, where the IT organization is going when you're talking about systems of engagement and stuff like that. And so, traditionally, we would have a developer say, I need an environment. The operator would say, great, I'll build you and configure your servers. Great, I'll deploy my code. Great, I'll run your deployment. Awesome, there's the application. Well, now there's ways to do this in which you can do that much better. And so now you can have an image repository of containers. You can have services offered up in a platform, like I was talking about with those software vendors that say, I am a database, distributed database company. I have cloud native software that can be consumed on a platform by way of an operator as a service to those development teams. That's self-service to developers. And it's creating a marketplace to developers that is allowing those developers to write those applications faster than they were before in the traditional way. Now you're able to also have namespaces and different environments to now be able to ensure before your code or your system gets deployed, it's going through development to testing to user acceptance testing to test the UI UX functions before it even goes out to production. And so traditionally, you buy some servers, or you deploy some virtual machines, and you create an isolated segmented environment and worry about network layers and all those other things that need to be protected there. Now in the cloud native framework, you can do that by way of a manifest, or by way of, I forget the other thing, but still, you can help do that. Now your modern application onboarding is you are able to create projects for those developers. Those projects now are isolated. Your operations teams are underneath. You're able to code. You're able to create a trigger pipeline. So things like Jenkins and things like that can be put into place for CI/CD. So ultimately, just kind of want to end with just start. Just start somewhere. Just start wherever you're at in your journey, and you want to go to the next phase of the journey. Start there. Some of you are already probably far left along, but you can go further. You know, just try to start setting those sights further. And ultimately, what will happen is these IT organizations that were very siloed in nature will now be able to merge together to be as one, and now you're going to have representatives for each one of those, or liaisons for each one, and be more cohesive and unified versus isolated, siloed, segmented, fenced off, boxed off by policies, controls, and procedures, and all those other things. I think that if you start to incentivize these teams to be able to deliver on that product that you're trying to build better, then over time you'll ultimately be able to evolve into that. So I ended up giving more of a talk than I did create open dialogue, but it was hard not to stay on the flow. But anyways, I hope that was helpful, and we definitely wanted to know if you guys want to carry on these conversations further. We want to create an environment of collaboration and stuff like that too for you all as well. So.
Yes, we still have the room for another 25 minutes if you guys want